Dundalk TV is sitting down with Anna
Renault from Essex.
Who is an author. Anna, let me ask, how long have you lived in the Essex area?
I've been here for over 65 years.
Okay, and you take pride in your community, and you're very interested in the environment, and you're a cancer survivor, and just an advocate and all-around volunteer for the community. So what would you like to share with us today?
Well, we're going to talk today a little bit about cancer. We certainly need to raise awareness that there are certainly issues, and most people, when you say cancer, they immediately think that people die. In probably the last decade or two or three, the increase in survivorship has definitely grown huge. And it's making a world difference, especially in the medical community, because they really don't know what to do with us now that we've survived and we have all these side effects and just a whole host of things. But one of the things I wanted to focus on today was actually you're diagnosed, you have the surgery, hopefully they've removed the cancer, and then you go into treatment. And what does that mean, especially if you go into chemo and radiation? And there are definitely side effects physically. If you talk about chemo, one of the big fears is that you're going to lose your hair. It's not the end of the world to go bald. I was bald for 9 months. However, there is a big side effect of chemo that we don't hear about and we don't talk about, and that is chemo brain. For a long time it was a joke. Everybody thought it was something funny and wasn't able to be proved, but studies have certainly been done, especially here in Baltimore at Hopkins and at University of Maryland, that had proven that there are definitely chemical changes within the brain. And there is actually now a medical diagnosis called chemo brain. And it really does impact your memory, your quality of life. And one of my, I guess you could call it horror stories, was when I started my chemo in 2009. I thought I was ready. I'd been through cancer before. I'd had all this, over the years, over the past 37 years. I'd had cancer a number of times. This time the chemo was much stronger. It was a 3-drug cocktail, and yes, I lost my hair within 10 days of having chemo, and they told me it would take a couple of months. Well, that didn't happen. But it also made me forgetful. It made me confused. I mean, I can remember getting in the car and driving home. I don't remember speeding. I don't remember, not being safe behind the wheel, and yet I got a speeding ticket for the first time in my life. Chemo definitely does impact your brain. One of the horror stories was the fact that I managed to forget to pay my electric bill. My bills are all nice and organized. I sit down once a month and I pay my bills. Certain things are automatically deducted out of my checking account. The electric bill was not an automatic deduction. And next thing you know, I'm getting a notice in the mail from BG&E saying they're going to shut my electric off. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And I realized that I was confused and that I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing because of the chemo brain. And I had to ask somebody to help. Fortunately, I co-own the house with my granddaughter, and it was actually a good thing for her because now she got to see a little bit more. I usually took care of the bills. She would just give me a check for her share of the monthly bills each month. And I said, you need to take this over. You need to step up and you need to make sure that things are being taken care of while I go through this chemo. And I'm not the only one. I mean, I've talked to hundreds of cancer patients over the years, and that seems to be an ongoing story, that the chemo brain gets in the way, the fact that sometimes you're physically sick from the chemo. There are all kinds of different side effects of chemotherapy that wind up impacting the way you do your job. And then maybe you can't go to work every day. Sometimes it's the nausea, the diarrhea, the physical kind of things. But then that other big piece that we don't hear much about is the fall created by the chemo brain. And then people wind up getting fired. Now the biggest side, go ahead.
Okay, and so someone loses their job, and you had mentioned before that some of the people wind up homeless, and myself being a traumatic brain injury survivor, if I wasn't living in a family-owned home right now, I've fallen through all the cracks. living on $700 a month for the majority of that time. Don't know how I did that other than God was looking out for me.
God is wonderful. He does tend to take very good care of us.
and so I know how easily it could be to be someone living on the street, and that's why I help out the homeless myself personally. So you had mentioned this, but in our previous conversation just before started the video, you were telling me that about the homeless shelters and how they treat people that have cancer. Now, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I actually wrote a book, and it's really geared towards children, but it's certainly great for adults to read too, because again, this is a side effect of cancer that we don't hear about. It's the non-medical side. So you have this chemo brain, or you have these physical side effects and you're not able to work. It is still legal in 48 states out of 50. It's still legal to fire you. It's not because you have cancer, it's because you can't do your job. And that's, understandable. I mean, if you can't do the work, why should your business pay you to keep you on the job? And unfortunately, a lot of businesses don't have sick leave. And that's something that Congress actually is debating right now, is whether or not every business should have paid sick leave. But let's face it, all businesses can't afford to pay for sick leave, especially for something like cancer. If you're going to be out for 6 months to a year before you get better and be able to come back and do a decent job, they're going to fire you. So what happens when you get fired? My book is called Why Did Cancer Turn My Life Upside Down? And this little boy who is 10, his dad got cancer, he lost his job, there's no income. First thing that the young boy notices is that the electric gets turned off. It's really hard to do almost anything in your house without your electric. You certainly, in the story, the little boy starts doing his homework at his friend's house after dinner because it's dark and there's no electric in the house. You can't take a decent shower because you don't have any hot water. I mean, there are definitely some really emotional and physical side effects to not having your utilities on. You can't keep your food refrigerated. You can't cook your food. There are just so many of these non-medical side effects that we don't talk about when it comes to cancer. Now, in the story, things get worse. Not only are the utilities turned off, but then the family gets evicted from their house.
Okay, now you have a couple other books there as well. Now, would you like to share the other cancer books right now?
Well, we can certainly talk about Why Did My Dad Get Cancer, and that's a book about, again, a small child based on my daughter, who was 7 at the time, asking, why am I going to the doctors? Why am I so sick? Why am I not working? And kids really don't understand, so we really need to have these conversations with kids of why, so that they understand. And then, yes, I do have another book called Anna's Journey, and it actually talks about my journey through the different cancers that I've had, the different surgeries, even to the fact that one of the doctors told me at the age of 27 I was too young to have cancer. And, knowing that cancer affects everybody at every age, I thought that was one of the dumbest things any doctor had ever said to me. And of course, he was wrong. I wasn't too young. I did have cancer, and I did have to have surgery. And fortunately, it was able to be removed, and of course, I'm here to talk about it.
Now, let me ask right now, being a traumatic brain injury survivor, I can tell you the majority of the professional sector of our society didn't have a clue what was going on or how to handle what I was doing. And when I was trying to tell them, somehow or another, I wasn't getting through to them. One of the problems is they weren't listening what I was trying to tell them at one point in time. And then if they didn't listen, they tried to take me in a direction that they wanted to go. I had forgotten what I needed to tell them by the time it came around. So how do you feel that the medical profession is doing at this point in time? And also, if they, if you feel they're doing a good job, what about a person such as the patient or the caregiver? What kind of advice would you give to maybe about second opinions or going with your gut feeling, telling the doctor different things and about what you really know about what's going on with the person? Do you see people falling through the cracks? And also, I wanted to ask, when you were talking about the sick leave and things of that matter, how Social Security does with cancer patients.
Well, let's start with, first of all, what's happening within the medical community. There are some doctors that are doing a wonderful job. And then there are some that think they're God and they really don't listen to the patient, and that's a real problem. And it's, again, something that I advocate for and talk about a lot with the medical community as well as with patients. I almost always recommend a second opinion. Doctors make mistakes too, they're human. They look at the test results, they interpret the test results, and if they don't quite match what they expect, I mean, there are books that say, this should happen, and this should happen, and this should happen. And as I've told many of my doctors over the years, my body hasn't read their medical books. My body never matches what the book says. I get these weird things. In 2009, when I was diagnosed with my breast cancer, my particular type of cancer matched 4% of the country. They didn't know what to do with me. It's not the normal what everybody else gets. So they gave me these drugs in September, and they didn't work because I didn't have that normal kind of cancer. So they had to change the drugs. And lo and behold, a brand new drug that had been on the market for less than a year was exactly what I needed. And it did do the job, and it did eradicate the cancer that I had. But it was almost like a trial and error. When you say that doctors practice, sometimes that's exactly what they're doing. They're practicing. Does this work? Does this work? But the other thing is you need to have a doctor that's going to listen to you. I happen to have right now a terrific team of doctors. My oncologist, my hematologist, even my internist, my general practitioner. When I say my body this or my body that, they listen to me. They know that I know my body better than them, better than the books, better than anything. I just saw a surgeon Tuesday or Wednesday of last week preparing for surgery on February 24th this year. I told him exactly what I thought was wrong. We went back, we did tests, and he said, "You're right." And I said, "Yeah, I know my body." So you really do need to have doctors listen. And yes, there are going to be some that say, "Where did you get your medical degree?" And I tell them, I got it from the College of Life. I know my body better than you. And this is what's wrong, or this is what needs to happen. And everybody needs to have a say in your treatment. It really isn't just the doctor saying this is what you need to do. You need to have a say. You agree, you disagree, it can be changed. There are options. These days there are options. I could go to Philadelphia, to the Cancer Centers of America, and get a totally different treatment than what I get here in Baltimore. Do I need what they have, or do I get what I need here in Baltimore? So far, 8 different times, I've gone to 3 different hospitals, and I've gotten exactly what I needed right here in Baltimore. I happen to be very fortunate to live in Baltimore. Now, you also ask about some other things about doctors, treatments, how things work. Certainly when it comes to, and again I mentioned the homelessness and the fact that there just really aren't a whole lot of laws in place or programs in place for those of us who are surviving. When I was a child in the 50s and 60s, if you got cancer, 90% or more of you probably died. That has turned around. Now, more and more people are surviving. Breast cancer, survival rates are in the 90% range. Lung cancer, you're in the 70 or 80% range. The fact that we have better diagnoses and better treatments, people are surviving. So, Congress actually is talking right now, and the President is pushing for, everybody to have paid sick leave. But they're talking 7 days a year. That's not these long-term illnesses, the chronic things, and something like cancer that's probably going to take a couple of months. Now, my sister had breast cancer. It was a little scoop on the top of her skin, or just under the top of her skin, and she really didn't miss much of any work. She missed a couple of hours a day when she got her radiation treatment, but other than the 2 weeks after surgery, she didn't miss any time from work. It was short, it was sweet, it was great, and I wish everybody had that kind of cancer, but most people don't.
To get back to you, as you were discussing everything, I definitely want to get into the Social Security and how that works out. but also you are telling how, I believe you said 37, you were 37 when you first diagnosed, and you've had a lifetime battle with cancer. So I'd like to know how prevalent it is, someone that does have cancer in their system, that it is a long-term battle.
Most people get one cancer and they're done. I happen to have gotten a lot of inherited genes. My mother's mother died of the cancer that I had first. So we know from testing that my grandmother apparently had it. She passed the gene to my mother, who never got the cancer. And my mother very nicely passed the gene on to me. We know so much more about genetics now. My dad had melanoma. I had melanoma. My dad had colon cancer. I had colon cancer. I think I got a gene from my dad. My dad had several sisters and brothers who have all died of some type of cancer. Apparently we do have a family hereditary gene somehow. And of course they're just now, in the 2000s, 2010s, that they're learning about what is the genetic factor. What causes my cells to divide and multiply and become cancer when my sister's doesn't, or my brother's doesn't? What's the difference? And so far, basically, it's I got this gene and they didn't. But we're also learning more about the environmental impact. Now, my sister and brother and I certainly grew up in the same neighborhood. We certainly lived in the same house. And for most of our life, we were in the same area. My brother did go into the Navy for 20 years and left town and even left the country for a while on Navy ships. But he certainly didn't always have the same environmental impact. My sister and I live maybe a block or two apart right now. And so we've been environmentally exposed to the same thing, except for maybe on the job. Was I exposed to something on my job that she wasn't? What caused me to get the cancers? And we don't have that answer yet. I think when we get that answer, then we will certainly see a dramatic drop in cancer, because we need to know the cause before you can find the cure. And they're working on that. They have come a long way. I was actually the age of 27 the first time I was diagnosed 37 years ago. And we didn't know much of anything back then. If I had had my breast cancer in 1977, I'd be dead. We didn't know enough back then to deal with what I had in 2009. So we've come a long way, and we keep improving. You know, people keep saying, well, we keep raising all this money, and somebody has a cure, but they don't want it out because it's multi-million-dollar business. And I don't believe that. The doctors I've worked with are very much into getting rid of cancer. They see how it devastates your body as well as your life. You know, people that wind up getting fired from their jobs, getting evicted from their houses, cancer really can devastate your life. And I don't know of any doctors, any good doctors, that don't want to see that changed. There are plenty of other things that these doctors can do. They don't have to deal with cancer. I mean, if by chance we find a cure.
Okay, we're in the Baltimore area. We're in Essex today, in your neighborhood, and I'm from Dundalk, doing Dundalk TV. But is there, please let me know about the Social Security, how that works out. And also, is there any resources the caregivers can reach out to, support groups or whatnot, that you would recommend?
Well, you keep mentioning Social Security, so let's talk about that. There are certain rules, and again, these are rules put into place by the feds. It's a federal program, and you have to meet their guidelines. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I've had cancer now 8 different times, had treatment, missed work, did all kinds of things. I've never been sick enough to qualify for Social Security disability. They said, you know, what you've got, it's treatable, it's curable, you'll eventually go back to work, you're not disabled. Fortunately for me, and this goes back to the paid sick leave thing, I worked for the government. I worked for the Maryland state government. And when I started working, I had some other physical problems, and I made sure that I kept every hour of sick leave I ever earned. Unless I was really sick, and especially after I had the cancer in 1977 and I was out of work for 3 months, I found out the value of that sick leave. I did not take a day off or an hour off with sick leave unless I was truly and seriously sick, especially with the cancer, because I knew I couldn't afford to live without it. There are a lot of people who have jobs that don't have even 1 day or 1 week of sick leave. This year, with the flu being so prevalent, Congress is now saying that every business needs to provide sick leave. Not every business can afford to pay you for a week while you're homesick. It's just not going to happen. It's not financially feasible. And unfortunately, we need to find some way of resolving that. And I don't know that there's going to be an easy answer. When it comes to, you don't qualify for Social Security, so what else is out there? Well, most people turn to welfare. Welfare doesn't always give you enough money to live on. I mean, it might give you a couple $100s a month, but you've still got to pay your rent, your utilities, and all these things, and it's just not enough. And again, it's something that needs to be seriously looked at on a government level. Here in Maryland, we're fortunate, and this is one of the groups that I do a lot of work with, and that's the Cancer Support Foundation. It's an all-volunteer organization, and their primary goal is to help people with cancer pay for non-medical expenses. They try to make sure that you keep your roof over your head, that you keep your utilities turned on, that you have transportation to and from treatment. They're very good advocates at contacting hospitals and doctors to make sure you get the treatment you need. They don't pay for treatment, they don't pay for medical, because Maryland is a very good state in terms of making sure there are grants and there are free programs and you can get treatment. But there are no programs that will make sure that your electric isn't shut off, or that you don't get evicted, or that your car doesn't get repossessed. All of those non-medical things. So we're very fortunate to have Cindy Carter and the Cancer Support Foundation here in Maryland. And if you're looking to make donations to a group that you want to make sure the money goes where it needs to go, Cancer Support Foundation is one that I can honestly say, I know in 2009, I wasn't still working for the government. So when I got sick, I didn't have that paid sick leave coming in. And I eventually had to say, you know what, my co-pays are building up, my extra expenses, I had diarrhea every day, so I had to buy extra toilet paper. I was crying a lot, I was buying extra Kleenexes. I was having all this nausea and stuff, and I had to buy medication for nausea. And of course I was doing the chemo, so I had extra medications for that. All these co-pays were adding up. And I finally contacted my friend, Cindy Carter, and I said, is there anything the Cancer Support Foundation can do? And she said, would it help if we paid your car insurance? Well, yeah, you pay my car insurance and then I can pay for all this other stuff, you know. I mean, it's just a wonderful way of allowing cancer patients to keep their life going. And again, we don't hear a lot about these non-medical problems.
Okay, is there any way to, do you have a phone number or a contact information for Cindy and for yourself?
For me, you can contact me through my website, annarenault.com. And for Cindy, there is a phone number, and unfortunately I don't have my glasses on, so I'm not able to see it. But if you can read that, there should be a phone number on there. Okay,
so the phone number is 410-964-9563. And that sounds like a wonderful program, and I hope to meet your friend sometime soon. And thank you very much for sharing all this very important information with Dundalk TV.
You're welcome.